Hello, I'm Dr.Angie McCartney.
And I'm Ruth McCartney.
Welcome to Teaflix,
where each episode's intimate conversation features a fascinating guest across the spectrum of Beatles world, pop culture, Grammy winners, the music industry, chefs, producers, music stars, actors, and more. So bottoms up and join us as they spill the tea on Teaflix.
Yes, we are live.
Oh, jolly good.
Once again.
Good. So
Absolutely.
Tell the good folks what's going on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Our guest today, kids and kidesses, is all the way from Liddypool, as John Lennon once called it, and our guest adopted and created a best-selling book that we'll talk about. We are chuffed to welcome David Bedford, who is a renowned Beatles historian, author, podcaster, and lifelong Liverpudlian, as you'll hear from his accent. Raised in the Dingle, just steps from Ringo Starr's childhood home, David has dedicated decades to exploring the Beatles' roots in Liverpool. He's the author of acclaimed books like Liddypool, which we'll talk about, Birthplace of the Beatles, the Fab 104, Finding the Fourth Beatle, and he served as a historical consultant on the award-nominated documentary Looking for Lennon. In 2025, in conjunction with Golden Age Music Collectibles and Stephen Wilson's Imagine and Wonder here in the United States, he and his co-writer, Andrew Phillips, have released What If, which is a posit of what if the Beatles had never met, which absolutely fascinates me. So through rigorous research and heartfelt storytelling, he's become one of the most respected voices in Beatles history. So please join us in giving a hearty Teaflix welcome to Mr. David Bedford. And the crowd goes wild. Hi, David.
Hello.
Good, hi, girls.
Yeah. Hi, David. Lovely to see you.
I love to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the time.
Oh, thank you for that introduction.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What inspired you to write Liddypool? And how do you think growing up Scouse shaped your perspective on the Beatles' early years?
Yeah, I think it was growing up in the Dingle, as you'd mentioned. So I'd gone to the school that Ringo had gone to, St. Silas, for my primary school. Thank you very much. Liddypool, there it is. And then when my wife and I got married, we lived in the Dingle for a couple of years. Then we moved out where I am now, which is just off Penny Lane, which you might have heard of. And our three girls were then born in the same hospital as John, Oxford Street Maternity Hospital, and all went to Dovedale School, which is the school that John Lennon and George Harrison attended. So I've literally had the Beatles around me my whole life. And it actually coincided with Yoko Ono giving a sizable donation to Dovedale School. And my wife Alex and I, we were involved with the parents committee at the time. And I thought, what a great story. Nobody's seen this side of Yoko. Nobody talks about that. So I wrote the story for a Beatles magazine. And at the same time, I got signed off work. They thought I had rheumatoid arthritis. Turned out it was fibromyalgia.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and I was told, and this is 25 years ago, I was not going back to work, and I had to find something to do. And I had to keep my brain active.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. So I thought, Beatles fan, had it around me all my life. I'll go and read a book on the Beatles in Liverpool, and I'll go and take pictures of all the places.
Gosh.
Yeah.
And nobody had written a book on the Beatles in Liverpool.
What?
That's
Exactly.
That's crazy.
So that then became my passion.
That's absolutely
wow.
wild. Yeah, I mean, because there are so many places now, that tours, and we had Jackie Spencer on, and there's, the Fab Four taxi tours, and it's a whole industry, isn't it now?
Well, it is, and I also then started doing Beatles tours as well, 20 years ago. So I keep myself very busy with that. With my friend Ian, we've been doing that for over 20 years now.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So that's great fun. Just meeting people from all over the world, doing private tours, taking them around, telling the stories, and
Great.
Yeah.
basically bragging about Liverpool and how great a city it is. But I let them find that out for themselves. And everybody loves it, as you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious Captain Obvious spots like, the Cavern, Matthew Street, and the statue down the pier head. But, it's so great now to see Rogue and Pete have opened up the Casbah. And, it's still a burgeoning thing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And Beatles tourism, they now reckon it's worth somewhere between 90 and 100 million pounds a year in Liverpool.
Wow.
That's just Beatles tourism. We're now getting at least 100 cruise ships calling into Liverpool every year now.
You wouldn't have thought the Mersey was deep enough, would you?
Well, the great thing is, because of all the sandbanks, as you'll know, you can only sail into Liverpool Bay, but they can park them up right by the Liver building.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's
You can walk off the ship, and you're right in the centre of Liverpool.
That's right.
Speaking of ne'er-do-wells from the Cavern, Keatsy's on. Hello, John.
Oh, hello, John.
Hello, John.
We've been trying to get him on here, but he's got a bigger name on the other line, I think.
Who's asked?
Exactly. So your book that I have here, which is this is my workout for the day. This is one of my favorites. I go to this time and time again. It's called the Fab 104, and it expands the Beatles story well beyond, obviously, our famous 4 mop tops. Was there anything that really surprised you during your research of finding the other 100 people?
A lot. There's a lot. When it started out, that started out as a chapter in Liddypool, and I just charted, how they went from John's first line for the Quarrymen and ended up as the Fab Four, and I think I listed about 27 musicians. So I thought, everybody's interested in that. I'll expand on each of them, and the 27 then I think went to like 36, to 42, to 49, and then it just kept going and going and going.
Yeah,
and there was something new all the time. And of course, it just ended up nicely that there are 104 people. And I was thinking, so it was all the musicians. Then I was finding the people who taught the Beatles to play.
Yeah.
Any other group they've been in, all the people they backed on stage. Yeah. And the biggest thing for me was having first met the Quarrymen back in 2004. They'd always said there was a guy at Quarry Bank called George Leigh.
Yeah.
And he suggested to John that he start a group, and nobody had ever found him, and everybody was searching for this George Leigh. And after Liddypool had come out, and I'd mentioned that, I got this email, and the subject line was George Leigh. I thought, okay, opened it up and said, George Leigh you're referring to is my dad. I went, what? So the guy's name is actually Jeff Leigh, which is why nobody could find him.
You're no kidding.
But, and you'll get this because you know Liverpool. So obviously when you're at a lad's school, you're always known by your surname and you'll get a nickname. Of course, our big department store in Liverpool,
George Henry Leigh. Yeah.
And therefore, because Jeff's surname was Leigh, his nickname was George.
Oh, I see.
Nobody called him Jeff. And he told me that on one day, John cycled down to his house, knocked on the door, and Jeff's mum answered. And John says, is George there? Sorry, son, there's nobody called George lives here. And John cycled off.
Oh, funny.
Because everybody referred to him as George, but his name was Jeff.
Oh, because of the big department store, George Henry Leigh.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was his nickname. So I'd actually found the guy everybody had been searching for.
Yeah.
He started everything because Jeff was the one who said to John, you should start a group.
Oh,
and more importantly, he also said, I've got a guitar. I can't really play it. Do you want to borrow it?
Oh.
So his guitar, he gave to John. And I searched for ages and I finally found the quote from John. First guitar I learned to play, I borrowed from a mate at school. This was the mate at school. It was Jeff.
Wow.
So the very, very beginning, and nobody else had ever found him. And it's one of those weird things that we historians, we sit in our little rooms and get very, very excited. And nobody else could understand it. When you find something like that, your head, you just want to scream. Yes!
Yes, I found it. That's unbelievable.
The very beginning. It was just so exciting.
Was Jeff Leigh still alive when you got the email? Did you ever meet him?
Oh, yeah. I interviewed him. Met him, got a lovely photo. They were doing at International Beatle Week a recreation of the fate up at St. Peter's.
Wow.
So Jeff came up and got a lovely photo with him and the guys from the Quarrymen, etc. And wow. Got a lovely photo of us all together. He died last year.
God, from Jeff Leigh to Jeff Emmerich, huh?
There you go. Yep. It's amazing.
And the bridge in between. Yeah. It's unbelievable. So research obviously is a huge part of your background and training and whatever. And had a question about collaborations.
Yeah. So how did your collaboration with Hunter Davies Keith Badman and Spencer Leigh come out for the Beatles book.
So the Beatles Book, yeah. Hunter approached me. He got in touch. I'd met him at some events and we'd emailed and stuff.
Yeah.
And he just got in touch and said, got an idea for a project. If you're interested, give me a ring.
Oh.
And so, well, I'm not going to say no to Hunter Davies.
No.
So all of us came down, and Spencer and Keith, I already knew as well. So we just met down at Hunter's house in London.
Yeah.
And he said, this is what we want to do. I want to do a book, which is like a Beatles reference book, right from the very beginning of the Beatles. So it starts from May 1960, when they become the Silver Beatles. You go right through, and then we'd each take a different section. So Hunter would do the people, because of what I'd done with Liddypool. Said that I did all the places.
Yeah.
All the places in the world connected to the Beatles. I did that. And then the rest of us split between with Spencer and with Keith. And we all just sort of compiled our own sections and ended up with this mega book, which is, it's got the four of us on there. And it was great fun to do.
I bet. Yeah, absolutely. People, places, and things. We had Spencer on a few weeks ago. I can't believe, first of all, he's 80 years old.
I know.
His archive and his collection and everything. But he's like a freaking walking museum, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, I met Spencer many, many moons ago. I was doing some volunteer work at Radio Merseyside, and he had this show on there. So I would go down on Friday evening after work. So this would have been early 1990s.
Wow.
And Spencer would always be in. And I worked at Norwich Union Insurance, and he worked at the Royal Insurance.
Oh, funny.
So we would compare our boring insurance lives and then pass over that. And so we've known each other for all these years. And we see each other at events all the time as well. So, but yeah, he's definitely 80.
He's a true gentleman. I really enjoyed his book too. You on another one of your books, because you're so damn prolific, in Finding the Fourth Beatle, you chronicled 23 drummers linked to the Beatles. And then I have another side. How did you go about verifying, tracking them all down? And then I have another side question that I learned from you from reading your books is that Paul actually sat in on drums for a group once in a working man's club, didn't he?
Oh yeah. Well, I have to make a correction about the 23 drummers.
Okay.
I have to apologise now.
No worries. My mistake.
Because I found 3 more.
Oh.
So I'm up to 26.
Oh
God. That's unbelievable.
And you know, when you started out, we didn't have social media to help you.
Oh, no. ChatGPT? No?
ChatGPT to check dates and facts.
Wow.
No, it's so, and it again. So as the Fab 104 came out of Liddypool, the Find the Fourth Beatle came out of the Fab 104. Because a friend of mine, he was the producer who worked on the Looking for Lennon documentary. And he said, "You've identified something nobody else has." He says, "You've identified 12 drummers in the book." I said, "Yeah, that's true." So he said, "You should write a book just about the drummers."
Yeah.
No kidding.
So I said, "Okay, well, let's do it together." Another collaboration. Gary Popper is his name. And so the original title was going to be called 12 Drummers Drumming.
Oh, God, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Until I found a 13th and a 15th and a 19th. And it ended up with...
Now you've got two baker's dozens, haven't you?
Yeah. And then since that's been published, I found 3 more. And the qualification had to have been between 1956 and 1970. They have to have played with the group, played live or played on a record.
Wow.
That's what they had to have done.
26 people. What was the most astonishing story or person that, out of those 26 people for you, the most surprising of either how it happened or who it was? Or
I think the one I was desperate to find about was someone identified in the Fab 104. And there was this legendary guy known as Ronnie the Ted.
Oh.
Now, Ronnie the Ted, this was after, so the Beatles, sort of Silver Beatles to Beatles. The first drummer as a rock and roll group was Tommy Moore.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember that.
Yeah. So Tommy, again, I was able to speak to members of his family. get all his story straight. That's what I love doing, is finding the families and the people who knew these guys.
Yeah, sure.
So Tommy had quit after they'd done their tour around Scotland. And
Whoops.
that in itself is a long story.
No.
And it involves John Lennon. There's a surprise.
Yeah. and alcohol and a temper.
Yeah, and a car crash.
Yeah.
Which cost Tommy a broken nose, split lip, and lost a few teeth. And concussion and stuff. And John still made him sit behind the drums that night. And Tommy's quote was, John used to turn around and try and make me laugh.
Because he was missing it.
Yeah.
Could he burst the stitches in his lip if he could? So they get back to Liverpool and Tommy quits and John's, why? Yeah, big surprise.
That's
my God.
funny.
Yeah.
My Lord.
So anyway, so they're going over and they're playing at the Grosvenor Ballroom in Wallasey. And of course, they've got the drum kit set up, but Tommy has refused to turn up. So John says, is there a drummer in the house? Making a bit of a joke, thinking they could borrow somebody. One lad gets up, I think he was 15 years old. He said, I sat behind. I played one song. I was so terrible. I took myself off the stage. Now, this guy later then turns up in Beatles history. His name is Jackie Lomax.
Oh my
no.
God.
Lead singer of The Undertakers, who then goes solo and is produced by George Harrison at Apple.
Oh my Lord.
So that's the first thing that Jackie did.
Do you remember the Undertakers? Their band van was a hearse, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. Used to go on with the coffin.
Yeah.
Undertaker's hat and everything.
I still have pictures of Saxophone Jones in his stovepipe hat.
Yeah.
Brian is still around. He's
Oh,
still
I know.
Oh,
We're
we're in
still in touch. We hired him. Hold on to your hats here. Before anybody knew anything, or 40, 50 years ago now, we hired Saxophone Jones from the Undertakers to be a second in command and replace Harvey Ellison in the Glitter Band when Harvey was too drunk or too ill or too whatever. Because Harvey used to burst into blood. You'd sit there having a cup of tea with him or a pint,
suddenly his face
and
got
all of
blue.
a sudden he'd go, "Have you got a Kleenex?" And he'd just start bleeding out of his head. And so we had to have a backup for the Glitter Band. So it was Saxophone Jones, and Glitter took one look at Saxophone Jones because he'd done an Undertaker's gig and he turned up for the audition dressed as an Undertaker. And Gary Glitter took one look at him and he said, "Well, you sound pretty good, but you're going to have to play behind the curtain, mate. You'll frighten the kids." They plugged him in and hid him behind the curtains. Poor Saxophone.
Oh, he was brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh,
he
my
is. I
God.
love Saxophone Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jackie Lomax has taken himself off. And this guy, Ronnie the Ted, as he was known.
Ronnie the Ted. So he was a teddy boy, not a mod or a rocker, right?
He's a teddy boy, leader of the local gang.
Yeah.
He was a big fella, well over 6 foot. Now, you know the Beatles and John, who tried to look like he was a fighter and tough.
Oh, yeah.
You know, none of them could fight their way out of a wet paper bag.
No.
So big Ronnie comes up and says, "I'll play." Well, none of them are going to say, "No, you can't."
It's like telling Tommy Cooper you're not going on.
Exactly. So he sits behind the kit and he plays for the rest of the night. And at the end says, "Can I join the band?" They're panicking, thinking, "What are we going to say?" Alan Williams, of course, is their manager at the time.
Oh, God.
Alan was only Diddy. But Alan looked up at Ronnie the Ted and said, "Don't call us, son, we'll call you."
Oh, my God.
And got them out of there. So I thought, I've got to find this guy, Ronnie the Ted. And ironically, it was Jeff Nugent from The Undertakers
Oh,
who
no.
came up to us.
Oh,
And Jeff said, "I know who it is. His name is Ronnie Calcahoon. And he was the leader of the gang, and he was tough as nails." Surprisingly, he died quite young. So he was a tough guy. For years and years, I'd wanted to find out who Ronnie the Ted was. And I was so made up when I found him.
No kidding. That's Alan Williams was lucky nothing happened to the Jacaranda, Italian lightning, right?
What a legend.
Yeah, no.
Every time we would run into Alan Williams,
He called me Mrs. McCarthy.
Mrs. McCarthy with a THY. he never got the name right. And I was like, you just wanted to pull
And
the
how's
stool.
Mr. McCarthy, you'd say?
Give my very best to Mr. McCarthy.
Well, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, wouldn't you think he would know Paul's last name?
Oh, what
No.
a
Not
piece of work.
necessarily. No, I mean, I met Alan many, many times over the years.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely guy. We spent some very happy hours talking. And I remember the first time I interviewed him was in the Grapes. And I was told, start early, get your best questions in first.
Yeah.
The only guy I ever met who drank red wine with ice.
Oh, interesting. I keep my red wine in the fridge, but I don't put ice in it. But
Red wine with ice. He'd been told to cut out alcohol altogether by his doctor. And he said to his doctor, well, that's not going to happen. So,
but ice it down.
Compromise? He said, well, at least red wine can be positive for you. He said, okay, I'll drink red wine.
Oh, and he thought by icing it, he was diluting the alcohol. God, what a character.
I have no idea, but he was such good fun. He really was.
Yeah, and you can't write people like him and Bob Wooler and
you can't make it up, can you?
And you and Keatsy and Winstanley. They're all. I mean, it's just full. The whole Beatles story is just full of bloody characters, isn't it? We took the Cabin Club Beatles to Austria in 2015, and Keatsy came out as their very sort of organized and sober manager. And I said we were staying in this little beautiful lake in the south, it's north of Austria, and the Armona Spa and Resort. And I said to the owners before we got there, I said, well, there's a whole contingent coming from Liverpool. There's like 6 or 7 of them coming. And it's an hour into town. Have you got plenty of beer, plenty of whiskey, plenty of tequila, And they said, oh, yes, we have enough for a month for a whole 300-room hotel guest list. Of course we have enough. It was dry in 2 days. They had to go.
Why does that not surprise me?
They had to go into town and get more booze. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, God, we had some fun on that trip.
And they checked out. We waved them off. They checked out to fly home, and I went to clear all the rooms, make sure nobody had left anything valuable behind. And I found a pair of Tony's Y-fronts in the bathroom. So we taunted him for months on Facebook, didn't we? Yeah. Found your knickers. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, my
mad. Just absolutely mad. So answer the question about, because you do, you have your podcast and storytelling and stuff.
Yeah. What was it like transitioning from author to filmmaker and then to podcaster? Do you approach storytelling differently in each case, or how does that work?
I think storytelling is the right word. I've always loved telling stories. One of the books I wrote, Inspector Rocke, was my part crime fiction and fact, or faction as I call it. Mm-hmm. So I've always loved telling stories, and a lot of that comes with doing the tours, because the tours is all about putting stories together. Yeah. And so Gary Popper, when he was wanted to make this film about John Lennon, he'd read the Fab 104 book, and he said, I've never found anybody who can tell the stories like that. We'd love you to come and help.
That's great.
Oh, great.
And so that because a lot of the people we then wanted to interview were the people that I'd got to know already. And
I see.
It was just a small team of us, that was it.
You had the Rolodex and the relationships, and because when we get approached all the time. I'm writing a book, I'm doing a documentary, I'm doing a film, and it's a question of trust. You don't know who these people are from Adam. You don't know if they're going to twist your words. You don't know, especially now with AI and voice manufacturing and all of that stuff. So all of those decades of research and relationships and being a trust architect, really, isn't it? When it comes down to it.
Yeah, it is absolutely. So it was. I learned so much doing that, because really it was a small team. So it was Roger Appleton, who was the director, and he'd done films before, so I learned so much from him. And with Peter Goodwin did a lot of the editing stuff. So really the three of us, then overseen by Gary, it really was a small team, and we all had completely different roles, and you just develop this trust between you. Yeah. And I had to learn that when you're making a documentary, you don't have pages and pages to tell a story. Right. You have to learn, and this was the beauty I've learned while they were editing. So we need that 15 seconds to tell that. So when they were interviewing everybody. I would always go on the interviews, part of it to be talking to the person, but also to learn. And the key thing was trying to get the person to give you that little soundbite.
Yep.
Yeah.
A bit. And it is so different to writing a book.
Yeah.
And I learned so much doing that. So that was a great experience. It really was.
Well, I think as a writer, you two are both authors. I've only done a cookbook, but you want as much verbosity as possible, because if somebody's going to spend 20 or 30 or 40 quid or even 100 quid on a book, you want to pack it full of the nuggets and all of the stuff. Like, but in film, Martin is our chief editor for McCartney Studios. And often we'll go out and interview our clients, corporate talking head stuff or chefs, whatever. And I say to them, please answer this in the form of a statement. So when I'm cut off, they won't hear the question. And please, sometimes we'll put a stopwatch in front of them so they don't go past 60 seconds. It's just filmmaking is the exact opposite of book writing.
Oh, it's totally. I started knowing absolutely nothing, and I learned so much. And I can still say, all these years later, I could never start and finish a film and do it all myself. I still don't understand fully how Roger, when he directs, and Peter when he edits, and how they can create all of that. Even though they've taught me through a number of times, I'm still in awe of what they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just accept I cannot do that.
Right.
But I just enjoy watching it. And I mean, with a YouTube channel, I've made a couple of 100 short films, so I've learned little bits of editing for that.
Yeah.
But if you had to do it in the whole thing, I still can't get my head around how you take 16 hours of interviews and put that into 80 minutes.
Brevity. There's a great tool that we use for YouTube, for social media. It's called Opus Clips, and you feed it. It's an AI app, and you feed it like our interview, a 40, 50-minute interview, and you tell it to look for the nuggets and the highlights and cut them out, and it'll do it for you now. But do it at the old-fashioned way. Good grief! I mean, it really is an art. I think a good or a bad editor can make or ruin a film.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And these guys are brilliant. So we've not long finished our second documentary about the Beatles in Hamburg, which is called No Hamburg, No Beatles.
Yep. Well, we'd love to have them on if they're interested. When it's out to be promoted and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's out over here, but it's not made it out in the States yet.
Yeah, but when it does. And speaking of new projects, what is behind you? What I really want to talk about is this fabulous book, What If? It takes the reader on a conclusional journey. How did you and Andrew Phillips arrive at this sort of gamification? Is kind of the only word I could come up with. It's almost like playing a game. What if this had happened, and what if that had happened, right?
Yeah.
How did you arrive at this, or was this another derivative of one of your books that, what if you hadn't found the drummer? What if Jeff hadn't given John a guitar?
Exactly. It all started when I was working on Liddypool.
Okay.
Because the biggest what if was, what if Ivan Vaughan doesn't go to the same school as Paul?
Yeah.
And Ivan and Paul are born on the same day. They end up in the same class. And Ivan's a friend with John already. If you don't get Ivan Vaughan, you don't get John and Paul, you don't get the Beatles. And that is a mind-blowing thing. And when I got that in my head all those years ago working on Liddypool, I started spotting other things where you can put down coincidence or whatever. And I was just always compiling a list. So a few years ago, so Andrew and I, we've known each other for many, many years. And we were at the Fest for Beatles Fans over in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And we were just having one of our discussions as we did. And we got on to what ifs. And I said to him, I've been compiling this list for years, and we started to bounce them off each other, and said, I've been wanting to put this into a book. Said, you understand where I'm coming from. Why don't we just do this together?
Great.
Now, Andrew had never written a book. He'd never done anything like that before. But because we were friends already, and we knew how well we got on together, I thought, let's just do this.
Great.
always fun when you can collaborate with somebody. And that then became this project, which became the Beatles What If.
It's fascinating.
It's nice to have this, the Beatles book with no definitive answers.
Yeah.
Well, and everybody can sort of draw their own conclusions. I'm looking for the page. While I look for it, Elizabeth's asking, did David Rainey do the artwork cover?
David Rainey did, absolutely. Yeah, well done, Elizabeth. Yeah, David, again, has been a friend of mine for years and a very underrated artist.
Absolutely.
And like a lot of artists, doesn't have enough confidence in himself. So I said to him, I want you to design the cover. And I threw some What If at him and said, have some fun with that, see what you come up with.
Right. Well,
and that's what he came up with.
It's great. It's like an old-fashioned newspaper. I love it.
Yeah.
When I was saying gamification, not really like a game, but there is that journey, isn't there? So explain to the readers what the decision tree sort of represents briefly.
Yes. Yeah. So decision tree. I was talking with Ken Womack. We were just chatting. I was saying, this is what we're doing, and he said, "Are you using decision trees?" I said, "Do you know what? I hadn't thought of doing that, but that is actually a very good idea." And so Andrew and I sat down and scribbled it, went backwards and forwards, and said, "Okay, I think this is how it will work." So we take just one topic and say, "What if such and such happens?" And then if it's yes, it happens, then you start going down. This is the outcome. If it's a no, it can go there. And so you can see the consequences. So we've done a few of those in sort of each of the major chapters. So, for example, let's look at the Beatles going to America.
Yeah.
And what if they go on Ed Sullivan? Okay. What if they don't go on Ed Sullivan? Well, the chances are, because of Beatlemania in the UK and the amount of publicity they were starting to get, if it didn't happen then, it would have happened not far after that anyway. So it still would have happened.
Yeah.
Right.
So we end up with 4 conclusions. Would it have been the end of the Beatles and that's it?
Yeah.
No. Would it have been makes no difference whatsoever?
Yep.
Would it have been, it happens, but it wouldn't be on the same scale?
Okay.
Or would it have been, we just don't know?
But you used clever song titles for all of those scenarios, didn't you?
Well, that's what you got to do. Got to have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
That was the idea. So if it's all over, then it's the end.
Yeah.
And in the end.
If it wouldn't have made any difference, it's let it be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of things where they got away with being naughty boys occasionally, and that comes down and say you can't do that.
Wow.
And they got away with some things. And so we're just looking at these different ways that Beatles history went, and what you then realize is a bit like Andrew and I, as with everybody, we all have what if moments in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my big one was, what if I didn't get signed off work 25 years ago?
Still be selling insurance, maybe.
Exactly. I would never have done these books, these films, everything. So I've had this amazing second life, which I never would have had because of that big turning point.
Yeah. I mean, we all have them in our lives. It's just that maybe we don't spend enough time. Karen, our friend from Edinburgh, Scotland, is asking, what if Mona Best never back, never say die at 33-1? And what if the horse didn't win? Then she wouldn't have been able to start the Casbah.
And the Casbah is so important.
So key. Absolutely it is.
It's a massive point in Beatles history. So that those moments where if you don't get them, that there's no Beatles for Brian to sign.
No.
Right.
If they don't get to Hamburg, Hamburg is what makes them the best band ever.
Right.
It's those hundreds of hours on stage.
Yeah.
Well,
they only got there, again, it's by chance. The way that they end up getting there, it's so many flukes. If you wrote it down as a work of fiction, nobody would believe you.
No, I know. Yeah.
Yael Sommer Breuer is saying, what if Alf Lennon had brought up John?
Well, what if Alf had taken John to New Zealand?
Yeah, I think that's what he means.
Exactly. That was the prospect.
Yeah.
Because if John doesn't end up in Woolton, then he never meets Ivan Bourne. Nigel Wally and Pete Shotton,
Right.
and doesn't go to Quarry Bank and form the Quarrymen.
I mean, we have a giant what if. We wouldn't be sitting here with you today talking about the Beatles if a guy called Mike Robbins, that Ange had met with his wife Bet Robbins years earlier at Butlins, because she was widowed when I was 2. She had to make extra money. And we used to go on the bus to Butlins in Pwllheli every other weekend. And she would play the piano there for extra money. And Mike was a redcoat and Bet was like a beauty queen, whatever. What if he hadn't got lost on the way to a McCartney family funeral at the end of Strawberry Road and gone into a greengrocer's shop where her sister Joan was standing? He walks in, he asks for directions, and my Auntie Joan answers him and he says, "Your name's not Angela, but you have exactly the same voice as a woman we used to know called Angela." She said, "Oh, well, my sister's called Angela." He said, "She got a little baby called Ruth." And she said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh my goodness, how's she doing?" And, "Well, as you know, she's a widow. She's working hard, this, that, and the other." "Is she on the phone?" And Joan said, "Well, no, but she works at Concrete Utilities. I'll give you her work phone number." Bet Robbins calls her and matchmakes and introduces her to Jim McCartney. And if Mike Robbins hadn't got lost and gone in that greengrocer's shop,
"I'm running late. Can anybody direct me to Broad Lane
Cemetery?
Broad Lane
Cemetery. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if he hadn't got lost,
Exactly.
we
It's huge what if, isn't it?
Yeah.
And normally we all have at least one huge moment in our lives, at least one.
Absolutely.
It completely changes your life. I mean, Andrew's one was, I think he was at 10 years old. His parents let him and his friend, also 10, go and watch the Beatles play in Bournemouth with thousands of others. They just arranged to drop them off on their own, go into the concert, and then come back. Now, who'd have think of doing that?
For a 10-year-old, no, but it changed his whole trajectory. Karen is saying, what if Eleanor Rigby had lived to hear her song? I wonder what, there wouldn't be a song because there wouldn't have been a gravestone and they wouldn't have seen it in St. Peter's Churchyard.
Exactly, because she died before any of them were born. She died.
That's right. My apologies to our friend, my apologies and all of our love to our friends in Israel. Ephrat Yael is a lady, is a she. I think I said he, sorry. Not familiar with the genders there, but apologies, Yael. And thanks so much for watching. And we send you all our love, and please stay as safe as you guys possibly can. You're on the mind round the clock. What if Jimmy Mack didn't have his jazz band? It's just crazy, isn't it? It's just set the crowd off with what ifs. It's a game. It's almost like a game of Monopoly, isn't it?
We'll do Debbie, by the way. I saw your message. It's an amazing thing. And what we decided was there were so many twists and turns in those first few years. It could have just spiraled out of control. So we sort of took the decision, we've got to be at the point where John, Paul and George have come together, because otherwise it will just go off and completely out of control.
Oh, yeah.
And so we thought we've got to have that point. So we talk obviously about those key moments, especially the Ivan Bourne.
Yeah.
But we had to arrive at that point at the end of 1957 that John, Paul and George were together in the group, and then go up from there. We also decided that we wouldn't look more than one step away. Otherwise, that you end up going down so many rabbit holes.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it's like I said, it's like Monopoly. You can just roll the dice and play all night, can't you? Because depending on where you land, what the outcome is.
What happens next,
and what happens next. So obviously you will have uncovered a ton of myths and stories. And
David, what's one myth about the Beatles' early years that you'd love to set the record straight on? I'm sure there must be several.
Or a story that you hear repeated that is just
not right.
It's
not right, yeah.
Probably the biggest one was when I was doing Finding the Fourth Beatle, when I could prove that Pete Best was never fired from the Beatles.
Huh? What?
Yeah. Pete Best was never fired. Because he couldn't be fired. Because we just accepted for all these years that Brian Epstein brought him into the office and fired him. So I interviewed Brian Epstein's lawyer, who explained it all for me. And of course he said, well, if you're going to fire somebody, you've got to employ them.
Yeah.
well, Brian didn't employ the Beatles.
That's right.
The Beatles employed Brian.
Oh my.
Yeah. So Brian couldn't fire him. But also, what I also then found was that at the end of 1961, John, Paul, George, and Pete had signed a legal partnership agreement, the first for any group in Liverpool. And I interviewed the lawyer who drew that up.
Wow.
And under UK law, you cannot fire a partner.
Oh.
You would have to dissolve a partnership and start again.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow, that's interesting.
So what they had to do was, because they didn't have time, they had to trick Pete into thinking he was being fired. And if you think of, we've always known Pete's version and Brian's version identical. Brian never tells him he's fired. He says, the boys want you out.
Yeah.
Your partners want you out of the partnership. And it's already been arranged that Ringo's going to join on Saturday. He never told me he was fired. But of course, there's Pete, 21 years old. What else is he going to think? I've been fired.
Well, and you know, I'm pretty savvy with music business and legal contracts, but that never occurred to me.
Yep. So then, but because of the management contract that the Beatles had signed, but Brian didn't sign, and Brian didn't sign it because he wanted them to have a get out in case he couldn't do what he wanted. So Brian was always fair. But because of that contract, Brian's still responsible for finding work for Pete.
Mm-hmm.
So he ends up with Brian's friend Joe Flannery invites Pete to join Lee Curtis in the All-Stars.
Mm-hmm.
When Pete says yes, in legal terms, Pete quits the Beatles.
Oh, so he's accepted another role in a different partnership or different entity, let's just say.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Pete then got bad legal advice because his lawyer tried to sue Brian for wrongful dismissal.
Oh, no.
Because Brian's lawyer said, but my client did not employ your client.
Oh, my. And technically speaking, that would be true.
Wow.
Good grief in heaven.
And then finding out that 4 drummers were asked to replace Pete. 3 said no.
Oh, jeez. 3 said no. I wonder if they're kicking themselves now or turning it.
None of them regretted it.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, you know, it's not the life for everybody, sleeping on buses and travel and road.
Absolutely.
Being
and
on
the
the
good thing is, you know, Pete, he's only just retired now.
Yeah.
You know, he's been touring and, you know, he's an absolute gentleman.
I love
him. He is a lovely, lovely guy.
Yes.
Again, I was honoured he wrote the foreword to Liddypool for me, which was an amazing honour.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it didn't work out for him in that way, but
that is
what a great guy. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest.
Wow. I did ask, didn't I?
You did, didn't you?
Oh, boy.
You asked the question, you'll get an answer, Ange. That's it.
That's good.
No.
So, how many Beatle-related books do you have out currently, including the crime faction novel?
Yeah, so this one, The Beatles What If, is my 9th book.
Good God.
Because we also did the Beatles Fab Four Cities, which I did with Susan Ryan and Richard Porter.
Yeah.
So that came out during lockdown, which was, again, great fun because we're working with 2 very good friends. And again, it was just an idea that I'd had because when I first went to New York on my first Beatle trip, I never understood why John Lennon would want to live in New York when you've got Liverpool. I went to New York, went to Manhattan and thought, yep, I get it. I felt at home. New York is just a very, very big Liverpool.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And so I thought,
nice.
okay, then I realized there's a lot of connections. Liverpool and New York have been connected going back to the 1800s.
Yeah.
And then I realized that the 4 cities that define the Beatles' career are Liverpool, Hamburg, London, New York.
Yeah, they're all river cities.
All big port cities, all with their unique identities, cosmopolitan populations, a live music scene.
Yeah.
And suddenly there were all these connections. So I thought, I checked it with Richard and he said, no, I felt the same. Susan said the same when she come to Liverpool.
Yes.
Said, okay, well, let's do it. So that was the Beatles Fab Four Cities. And the things we found out, the connections historically and Beatle-wise, that connects those 4.
I have to get that book again. I had it and I loaned it to somebody and they never brought it back. Swine.
Oh, I've had that happen many, many times.
Yeah, we had May Pang on a good while ago now.
Yeah.
She talked about how they used to sit on the rooftop, the place where they saw the UFO, you know, and they'd sit on their rooftop terrace overlooking the East River. And John would talk all about how, you know, it reminded him of the Mersey and it reminded him of his hometown, and the tall buildings made him homesick for the liver buildings and all of that. So, you know, it was definitely acknowledged by John per May that's where he just felt that sort of kindred spirit with the sea, I guess.
And that was fact when I first went to Hamburg. So Richard and I covered Hamburg together. So we went out there, I think it was 2016 or 17. And we walked down to the river. And Angie, you'll get this completely. As we walk down there, there's an overhead railway running along by the river.
The overhead, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, if you were the Beatles and you're walking down to the river for the first time and there's an overhead railway, your Docker's umbrella, as Liverpool had.
That's right.
As New York had, because Liverpool's was based on New York's.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So you get all these connections. So they would have felt at home. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but I only feel comfortable in a place if I can be by water.
Yes. Martin's
so.
the same too. He grew up in the middle of Germany in Kassel, and once we moved to California, that first night he put his toes on the sand and his feet in the Pacific Ocean. He's like, that's it. We lived in Nashville for 3 years, but he was miserable. He didn't get out of bed till noon, and he's got to be by the water as well.
Yeah. Well, Nashville, so that leads you on to the other book.
Yeah.
The Country of Liverpool, Nashville of the North.
Yes, that's right.
So again, with nothing to do in lockdown, I did my book on the country music scene in Liverpool.
Which was huge. I mean, because again, it's a port city, and all the music came in from Jamaica. And one thing we've talked about on here before, a lot of people didn't know, Liverpool has the oldest Chinatown outside China.
Certainly does, and the biggest Chinese arch outside China.
That's right.
And it's the first established Chinese community in Europe.
Yep.
In
1300s, right? 13 or 1400s, I think.
It's an amazing place. So Chinese New Year is always massive here.
Yeah.
Then there's a big Chinatown in New York and London and in Hamburg.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
It's the sailors that connect it all.
Yeah. Hello, sailor.
Hello,
watch that, madam. Be careful when you do that. Yeah, country music was massive. And the fun thing about learning about country music was looking at the country music influences of the Beatles, which is huge. You know, all those artists that inspired them.
Kitty Wells and all that, yeah.
But even look at Elvis.
Yeah.
And Buddy Holly, Everly Brothers. They all got their roots in country music.
That's right.
And country music was all here in Liverpool. And they were listening to country music. And when you think of the roots of country music, which in America, it comes from the Appalachians.
That's right.
So where did they get it from? They got it from the Ulster Scots from Northern Ireland. So the roots of country music are in British folk music, which then the Brits and particularly the Ulster Scots took over to the Appalachians. Then it comes down the Appalachians, and then you get roots country.
Yep.
So it started here, went over there, came back over here. And so again, it's been this huge, huge American influence in Liverpool.
Right.
Of course, through Burton Wood.
Yep.
We had all those American servicemen here during the war.
Right.
For decades after, I think they only left sometime in the 80s. I can remember because I started in my insurance job in 83.
Yeah.
And we were the only company who would insure the Americans at Burton Wood with the left-hand drive cars. So I knew they were still there. So the insurance comes in handy occasionally, not very often, but occasionally.
That's right. So Karen in Edinburgh is saying he's an absolute genius with family trees.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
You and Karen should message each other, actually, David. His research on the Beatles family trees and who they go back to and how they connect is fascinating. And he's saying all of the people that they were influenced by have Scottish ancestry. Elvis and the Everly Brothers, the list is endless. So, you know, that's, again, it's, and Yael, she's saying hillbilly music has Celtic roots.
Absolutely right.
And it's, absolutely. It's absolutely.
And of course, Irish folk music was massive in Liverpool because we're the most Irish English city.
That's right. That's right.
So a lot of the roots of country music are in Irish music, which has always been here.
And Ringo was the one who's the biggest fan of all, I think, right? Because he's still a huge country fan. He's just done a country record.
New country album, yeah.
Great.
But they were all also fan. John Lennon was a big Hank Williams fan.
Yeah.
And if you listen to Hank Williams, you hear the beginnings of rock and roll.
That's right.
You listen to "Move It On Over"
Amazing.
by Hank Williams. "Move It On Over." The melody of that is taken a few years later and becomes "Rock Around the Clock."
Wow.
Yeah.
Go listen to "Move It On Over" by Hank Williams.
I will indeed. So with so many Beatles books already out there, what keeps you passionate about uncovering new angles? And do you think there's still untold stories to chase?
There's always something new. Last week I was doing a talk for a local pensioners group just near me.
God bless him.
And just telling some of the stories, and out of the room, there's only like 20 people in there. The lady who'd organised it said, "Oh, my next door neighbour and good friend was Paul's cousin.
Oh.
She's one of the Mowens."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Another lady had said she was at Egbert Vale School.
Yeah.
And she'd arranged for the Quarrymen to go and play there.
Oh, God.
Now, I'm trying to find out more because we've not got a list of that one. So I'm going to find out more. Because, of course, the other thing that I've ended up doing for the last 2 years is playing with the Quarrymen. So I've gone from interviewing the Quarrymen and becoming friends with them for the last 2 years, or 2.5 years now. I now play bass and sing with the Quarrymen.
Oh, my God.
So
we're breaking tons of news here. We're spilling the tea, as they say.
So Colin Hanson and Rod Davies from the original Quarrymen are still playing.
Well, you'll have to go and put yourself in Fab 105 now.
Well, it's funny. It's from writing about Beatles history, I'm sort of in a little part of that. It's amazing.
Wow.
So actually, we're heading off to Felixstowe at the weekend.
Yeah.
We're playing at a Beatles festival there.
Fantastic.
In January, we were in Brazil.
Really?
Oh, that's right. You were.
Yeah. Headlining a Beatles festival in Brazil.
We used to live in Kings Lynn, and my favorite sign along the highway there towards Felixstowe, it said, "Dover for the continent, Felixstowe for the incontinent."
I'll check if it's still there. I love it.
Some broken painted a sign, and it was there for years.
Oh, I'll let you know if I'm incompetent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, with you jetting off all over the place and now being a rock star.
Yeah, so what can we expect next with that busy brain of yours? And where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at davidabedford.com.
It's going across the bottom.
Okay.
And I know if you see the Echo, there was an announcement of there's going to be a play coming on in Liverpool in September at the Epstein Theatre. So it's just been announced a couple of days ago. So the Epstein Theatre, which used to be the Neptune, as you'll have known it, has been closed for a few years, but it's reopening. So
yeah, I saw something. Knophoff's doing a Perfectly Frank, his Sinatra gig there, isn't he? Soon. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of great stuff. So while I was making the Hamburg documentary, I said to our team, I said, "Do you know what? This would make a brilliant musical because you're going to have the story of Hamburg, which is so much fun, and you'd have the best rock and roll soundtrack ever."
Yeah.
So we've got together with a guy called Ian Salmon, who's a brilliant local writer. So he's written the script. So I've just acted as consultant for getting the history right.
Yeah.
Fantastic local director, Stephen Fletcher.
Oh, yeah, great.
And Andrew Schofield, who's been one of Liverpool's great theatre actors for decades. He's going to play the main role of Alan Williams in that. So in September, for 2 weeks, we're going to have this play called Shake It Up Baby, which tells the story of the Beatles in Hamburg.
Great.
So I've been working on that.
Wow.
Which is great. And working on the movie. More on that another time.
Yeah, well, when that's closer to the time when the play's coming out, we'd love to have you back on we can fit other guests in here too if Andrew wants to, whatever. But that is fantastic. Well, you will probably know Andrew's got a book out called Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus.
Oh, yes. I have a copy.
Jolly good. And so of course, our special guests are thank you, because we can't come around and buy you a pint because you don't drink and it's 6,000 miles.
But apart from that.
Apart from that, so your special guest thank you is
dedicated to Limerick.
Your own a 2-stanza limerick today. So if you're sitting comfortably, we shall begin. And a 1, 2, 3. When it comes, starting again.
Okay, fine.
All together now, ladies.
Right glasses on.
Right glasses on, yes.
And a 1, 2, 3. When it comes down to Fab Four obsessions, David teaches a Beatle-themed lesson. From Cavern Club days through Liddypool's phase, he documents every progression. Now he's asking a head-scratching question. What if fate took a different direction? If John missed the band or Paul played with Stan, would we still feel that Beatles connection? Ta-da!
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
That is so fun. It was
I'll email it to you.
Please, Angie. Oh, that'd be lovely. Thank you. I'm honoured. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's been lovely listening to all your wonderful stories.
And this will be on McCartney.com this afternoon, and also on our Teaflix YouTube channel, and we'll share it with everybody. Thanks so much, because I know how busy you are, for taking the time and locking the dog out and kicking the family out the house.
And the dog never made a noise. Yes,
that was great. That's right. Oh, somebody here is saying, let's do another What If with David, Elizabeth says. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And good. Brendan from Ireland, he's writing a book about the other stuff the Beatles did outside of music.
Oh, very good.
Ooh. Is that Brendan Foley?
No, Brendan McKinley.
Oh,
so okay. Wonderful. So thank you so much again, David. Check out davidabedford.com and thebeatleswhatif.com. And of course, your local Amazon store, you can get all of his wonderful contents of his brain there. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you next week all of a sudden.
Okay.
Ta-ra.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Take care. Ta-da.
Thanks for tuning in to Teaflix. And check out Dr.Angie's books, Organic Teas and CBD at mrsmccartneysteas.com. Toodle pip.